Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social Podcast. Today we're going to be discussing an epic race in Diegem, an absolute all-timer, and with me here to discuss that is Issam. Welcome Issam.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Do you have any oxygen left for me in your tank? Because I will be needing some to recover from this race, because Gavere race of the season, well, Diegem certainly passed that for me at least. What a race.
I don't know if I have something left, but it was definitely, you said Gavere was the race of the season, but I think today there was something else. The emotional roller coaster that we had to go through with the men's race was something else.
Yeah, Kevin Kuhn had the fastest start, but Van der Poel was quick to take over the lead, and he caused a leading group of 4 riders to break away from the rest. The 4 leaders were Iserbyt with Pidock, and then of course Van Aert and Van der Poel. Iserbyt got dropped and fell back to a group behind, and Van der Poel, he attacked again from that leading group of 3 just before the halfway point in the race. He had a very good passage through the sand and opened the gap. His gap went up to 9 seconds, and just about at the time that it looked that he was able to consolidate that gap and was in a position to start expanding that gap, he went in for a new bike. Pidock in the background had actually dropped Wout van Aert because Van Aert was again in trouble in the sand section. But Pidock, he gained new confidence out of that situation where Van der Poel took the new bike. He came back, and Van Aert, he found a new gear. He all of a sudden was back. He looked dead a couple of minutes before, but he flipped the race around in 40 seconds. The 3 came back together, and before the sand section, Van Aert took over the lead. From there on, Van Aert had a very good passage through the sand, and this time it was actually Van der Poel who had the bad sand passage. Van Aert opened the gap. It was almost déjà vu to the situation before, because this time Van Aert had a gap of 9 seconds, but went in for a new bike. This allowed Van der Poel to come back, and Van der Poel had actually distanced Pidock in the chase. However, this time it was Pidock who flipped the race around completely again. The race was turned on its head as Pidock took the lead, and that caused this time Van der Poel to be under pressure. And this time it was for real. Van der Poel was done. The light went out for him. He had nothing left in the tank and needed to settle for third. We went into an epic battle between Pidock and Van Aert in the final lap. In the final lap there were numerous position changes. Tom Pidock even taking a very, very audacious, almost Formula 1 style line, lining up his corner super wide, cutting across the apex and overtaking Van Aert after Van Aert had just overtaken him before. It looked to be that Pidock was going to go into the final muddy section first, but Van Aert managed to squeeze through somewhere and went into that section first. Pidock then made a small slip in the penultimate corner, which led to Van Aert going up the stairs first and ultimately saw him take his first win in Diegem. Pidock needed to settle for third with Van der Poel in third, but what a race, what a race. Issam, we can talk long or short about form or whatsoever, but I'm interested to hear for you, what was the moment of the race?
For me, the moment of the race was when Van Aert and Pidock were coming back to Van der Poel that was leading, and on a course like Diegem, Van der Poel is the guy that we said was the main favorite, and the record that he has speaks for itself. But that was for me the dynamic that changed the race to a race where we were thinking that there was one guy that was able to win, to then Van Aert and Pidock coming back and even taking over from him, and Van Aert then looking to then go for a solo, and Pidock kept on fighting and made sure that the race was going to be a race with full of tension till the last corner. I think that was for me that later part of the race, the curveballs that were thrown at us, that was definitely the moments of the race. But I think it's so difficult to pick just one moment, because I think the whole race was really, truly it was fantastic to watch. It was again great to be sitting on the couch and watching it from the TV, or I think as a spectator it was even more exciting. It was from the start it was great to watch, and it was exciting from the start. It was amazing.
The switches in momentum this race were just insane. As you say, at some point we thought, oh, Van der Poel is consolidating his lead. He looks to be in for another win in his playground in Diegem. But then all of a sudden Van Aert comes back in it, Pidcock comes back in it, and I think that the moment of the race, therefore, was the moment that Van der Poel went in for a new bike, because that bike change really gave new life to the chase behind. Van der Poel in the post-race interview said he didn't have great legs, and that might be true, but I think he wasn't actually too far away from winning this race. If we look at the lap times, in the lap that he attacks, he puts in a 7:24. That's an insanely fast lap. That's the fastest lap of the race. He put it in lap 2, he put it in lap 5, and then Van Aert put it in lap 6. So you can see that it's clearly a very fast lap time. Van der Poel has them under pressure. He is in a position where he has a lead of 10 seconds, and I can understand his reasoning. He thinks, I haven't changed bikes for a couple of laps, it's muddy, I don't want to get a mechanical. But he already lost a second on the off-camber because Pidcock was insanely fast there. 9 seconds became 8 seconds. He loses 3 by changing bikes. Pidcock then all of a sudden can see Van der Poel and thinks, hey, I'm 4 seconds closer. I was 10 seconds down, now 5 seconds. Ooh, that's great. I need to keep going. And the same happened with Van Aert, because Van Aert was almost out of it. He was dropped by Pidcock. He was struggling through the sand. He was really almost knocked down. He was waiting for the final punch. And Pidcock, he was also waiting for the final punch. It was just waiting. At some point, this gap should have gone to 12 seconds or 13 seconds. And then it would have been game over. The head would have gone down. They would have focused on the battle for second. Now the opposite happened. Van der Poel gave them new life in their chase. They gave them new morale. And that allowed them to eventually come back in this race. And then Van der Poel paid the price for a very furious first half of the race, because he went very, very deep, and the same goes for the rest. But Van der Poel spent a lot of energy in that first part of the race.
Yeah, he definitely did. It was, he had the advantage in the sand section, and then the barriers, especially compared to Van Aert, he was going over the barriers faster. Then, for Van der Poel, it was definitely the moment for him to put them under pressure. Not with the intensity that he was doing, maybe, especially if you look at the lap times and see that it was very close. I think both him and Van Aert were going very, very deep till the last moment. Pidcock was looking a little bit more, I wouldn't say relaxed, but it was a bit fresher than the two, Van der Poel and Van Aert. He looked a little bit better in terms of racing and his facial expression and stuff. He was still going deep as well in this race, but also in the post interview he looked all right. But yeah, Van der Poel, if he didn't put that intensity in the beginning part of the race, he might have been in a better position later on. And yeah, maybe afterwards you could argue something like that, but I think that he probably thought that he had the legs to do what he did, but later on found out that he didn't have the legs, and he was also very honest in his post-race interview about that.
I mean, it's easy in hindsight. I think the decision in the moment makes sense, but if we reflect back on it, it probably wasn't the smartest thing to do, and we can equally say the same because Van Aert does the same. He flips the race on his head. Van der Poel is thinking, what is happening? I have been the master of this sandpit. I have taught Van Aert to take the right line instead of the left line. Now all of a sudden he's copying me. He's in front of me. What's going on? He gets 9 seconds and then he does the same thing. In hindsight, Van Aert also shouldn't have gone for the bike change there, because for him it would have also been easier to win from the position with 9 seconds ahead rather than needing to fight it out till the line against Pidcock. Pidcock also made a weird bike change, because when Van Aert placed that attack, Mr. Pidcock went into the pits. What were you thinking there, Tom? That's not the moment to go for a bike change, but yeah, they all made some weird bike changes. I feel like with the intensity of this race, there were almost no easy decisions to make in terms of when you're going to go for a bike. I did notice that Pidcock was changing bike quite a lot. Normally he is a rider who's very conservative in the number of bike changes, but today he definitely didn't take any risks, which is probably the best, but still, the timing sometimes was a bit off. I do think that Pidcock towards the end of the race started benefiting from that left line in the sand pit. In the beginning it didn't work, but as more riders went through there was a clear rut forming there, and it looked to be almost as fast, if not faster, than on the right side. So that eventually seemed alright and seemed to keep him in the race. But they all made some weird tactical decisions throughout the race. But at the same time, they all looked knocked out. And Pidcock also flipped the race on his head because Pidcock only just came back before the sand, like the uphill before the sand section, like in the nick of time. And only because Van Aert and Van der Poel clearly killed each other's legs and needed to get some recovery. And that's just the dynamics of the race. And he might have looking fresh, mainly I think because he could sit in the wheel for some time. But he also needed to put in quite some effort because third in that group, closing gaps from every corner, trying to follow Van Aert on the straight when he is racing like a TGV. Yeah, it is by far the best race I've seen from Pidcock ever. Like, on this course, to fight with them, bravo.
He definitely was having a ticket one way to the finish line with Wout van Aert in terms of, the way Van Aert was going. That was almost like a TGV. It was fast. It was really fast. But Pidcock, on a course that normally you would say that is not really a course that suits him well. He, we tend to say that Pidcock lacks a little bit of power compared to Van der Poel and Van Aert in terms of crosswise. And there was also something that Kurt Bogaert said during the race in the broadcast that Pidcock doesn't have the same natural ability that Van Aert and Van der Poel have in terms of cyclocross. But today there was nothing to even think about that. Pidcock was always doing his best to stay with the two. Even took initiative in the last lap and tried to break Van Aert. Then that amazing move, like you said, where he did the over-under, went a little bit wide, cut it back and passed Van Aert there, which was amazing, and could have been the move of the race. But Van Aert was still had something left in the tank and was able to then pass Pidcock again. But he was definitely surprised by that move, and I think that Pidcock today was a very mature drive. He was, going from the first lap. He had a good start, which is also something that hampered him from time to time. And he was meant to be with these guys, and he definitely showed today that he deserves to be called one of the big three. Yeah.
Yeah, if that was even a thing. I think he was eager to show himself after yesterday. He was pissed after his race yesterday. He was not happy. He wanted to show him, and he did. Despite the fact that he had that first-class ticket on TGV Van Aert, he was able to still provide the fight. And he maybe said it was the easiest out of the three, but I think that had to do with his technical ability. Technically, he was so superb today. That off-camber, he was the fastest there every lap, and especially the corner of the off-camber. That was fabulous. Of course, getting those technical moves in, but towards the end of the lap, there was this corner when they came off the bridge, the muddy 180 corner. How late he got off his bike there, sliding in the mud, throwing his bike around the corner. It was absolutely fantastic skill by him today. And that is, I think, what kept him in the race. And despite that, he couldn't take the upper hand of Van Aert in the final lap. I don't think he can really blame himself or anything, because even if he would have been in the wheel of Van Aert or ahead of Van Aert up that stairs, Van Aert probably wins that sprint. Although, if Pidcock is in first there, who knows? But he gave it his everything. They changed positions a number of times. And then you can't really say, well, he should have done it later, because where Van Aert did it, there was basically no room to really make a move. But at the same time, I've been hyping, or at least giving credit to Pidcock now. Let's also give credit to Van Aert who wins the race, because halfway through the race, it looked to be that he thought it was over. He thought, okay, it's going to be second or third today, whatever, it's fine. My legs are dead. But somehow he managed to switch a button in his head and dive super deep, because his first reaction after the race, this can't be healthy, really said everything about how deep he needed to go today.
Yeah, I mean, Van Aert was, I think, 2-3 times out of the race. And also in his body language. And then out of nothing, tries to find something in his legs. Mentally is like, okay, I cannot just look at the race unfold. I have to try and get back. Got motivated again, or however you want to call it. It's easy from us to say that when we are sitting on the couch in a warm house, looking at those guys bending it out at night in the cold. But then he find some fire again and was able then to just get himself back together and get back in the race and try to, to win it, and then eventually also win it, So Van Aert is someone that is probably the worst guy to have as a rider that's going to chase you, because he doesn't really understand the word give up. He never gives up. He's always trying to battle. That was always the case when he was battling Van der Poel. Well, Van der Poel was in many races a little bit better. He was always keeping the gap 20, 15, 30 seconds, but he was always trying to keep the gap as close as he could in case something happened. And today it was, there were definitely some moments that he was in difficulties, but he just kept on going, and the deserved winner for sure, and gave us a great show and great race to watch.
You can knock Van Aert down 10 times and he will get back up 11 times. Such a class rider. He never gives up. This is what we know from Van Aert. Even in the seasons that he would always get beaten by Van der Poel, or at least on a very regular basis, he would always keep fighting. Even if the gap was 20 seconds the whole race, he would keep giving it his all. He would always keep pushing in case something happened. And as you say, he's a terrible rider because you can't get rid of him. You think, oh, finally, now surely he's cracked, and all of a sudden he goes deep again. And that's just fantastic, and it eventually also means that he absolutely deserved this victory. I think there's cases to be made about all three riders deserving the victory. But at the same time, I am a bit scared for what is left to come, because we have now seen 3 days with 3 super tough crosses. Tomorrow is a rest day, I assume at least, and then we go again in Loenhout. They will bring up the fight again and they will go deep again. Pidcock then does Baal and Herentals again, all 3 riders at the start. And then after that, Van der Poel and Van Aert, they go to Koksijde, they face each other again there. Then they go to Zonhoven, face each other again there. Surely it's not possible that they keep racing like these absolute madmen all the time. Surely it's just not possible that they are able to do that, because at some point, even for these riders, their energy levels must go down. At some point, surely they might think, well, maybe today I don't need to force the decision in the first part of the lap, and if we just take it easy, we can maybe, instead of attacking in lap 1 or 2, the first part of the race, we can drag it on a bit and do it a bit later and save some energy, because it's been absolutely insane the level that these riders have brought up the past couple of days.
Yeah, indeed. I think that the next couple of races that they will see each other, they will take it a little bit easier. But to be honest, today it was not full gas from the start. The race unfolded like it unfolded, and Van der Poel was basically the guy that really wanted to start something. And in Zolder, it was the same scenario. It was again Van der Poel that opened that race very fast. So I think that the key is with Van der Poel at the moment, because Van Aert, when he was with Pidcock in Dublin, was his way of racing was a bit more conservative. With Van der Poel, it's we know that he has the tendency to go fast from the start, or at least try to be at the front from lap 1, and then at lap 2 or lap 3 try to open a gap, or at least put the opponents under pressure. So that will be the key factor. Does Van der Poel wants to open the race so fast, or after these races does he think that it's maybe a better idea to take it just a little bit easier at the first 2-3 laps, which also brings some risks because you have the other riders are going to be there as well. They're going to fight for position, and that can put you in some trouble. But I think that they are great riders and professionals, so they know what they're doing, and I think that they know what their limits are. So I don't think that they will get themselves into a lot of trouble in the next coming races, and they will get themselves going well.
Yeah, you are right, Issam. This was cross as cross was meant to be, and it does bring risks to take it easier in the first part of the race. You're absolutely right in that. Bigger chances of a crash, colliding with other riders, having other riders intervene, which means you miss the decisive attack. But even these riders can't have infinite energy reserves, because Van Aert and Van der Poel were both very dead. Pidcock looked relatively fresh, was even joking about motor pacing tomorrow, but at the same time, I don't know if I should look anything behind that. Is Pidcock a bit fresher? Maybe. Maybe he recovers quicker than the other two. Maybe it's not the case. We will see in Loenhout how that goes. Many of the all-time cross riders are going to be skipping that one. No Zweek, no Iserbyt. We'll talk about those riders in a bit, but I would expect that they need to be taking it a bit easier, because if they keep racing like this at the end of the Christmas period, both riders will be absolutely dead, because Pidcock is skipping out of the races in the latter part of the Christmas period. No Kokzijde, Gullegem or Zonhoven for him, so that could benefit him, but this is my final say on this. Pidcock, please race the World Championships. Come on, please do it. Let's look at the entire top 10 then. Van Aert with the win ahead of Pidcock and Van der Poel, as we just discussed. Iserbyt, strong race by him, ended 4th. Van Toerenhout, 5th ahead of Van der Haar and Hermans. Thibaut Nys 8th ahead of David Haverdings and Kevin Kuhn in 10th. I would have hoped that the top 10 was boring for the rest, so we could keep it relatively short, but we can't do that. We need to talk about some of these performances here. First of all, Eli Iserbyt. Issam, what is up with him? It's inconsistent. He's as inconsistent as Dutch weather, because yesterday he was nowhere. Today, all of a sudden he's 4th, staying with the big guys in the first part of the race, and then eventually riding away from the rest pretty easily. Super weird.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday you asked the same question about what's going on with Iserbyt, and I think I said something along the lines of that it's hard to tell what's going on with him, and today it was also very hard to tell what's going on with him. He started well, was going quite well with the 3, then was not able to follow, but kept his 4th place. I wouldn't say relatively easy, because I think Van der Haar and Van Toerenhout were definitely closing in on him, but then at a certain point the gap started growing again, and he kept on that 4th place and was over the line. You saw the kind of, I think, maybe a relief. It's hard to say, but I think that Heus de Zolder was definitely not a smart race to start going again, because it's a shock for the body. So hopefully that is the main issue for Iserbyt, or that was the main issue yesterday, and today he was in a race which is a little bit slower. It was more a cross in a way. So hopefully that will give Iserbyt the opportunity to get back into a rhythm. Is it pain-free? I don't know, but probably today there was not really a lot of pain, and when it goes a bit wrong or he has a bad result, there is maybe more pain involved. So I don't know. It's very difficult to say. I think with the result like this in Diegem, there is not going to be a scenario where, like we were, suggesting in a way, where if it was not going to be a great result here in Diegem, that he should then be looking at his season and focus maybe on the Belgian Championships, or just do 2 races and then already go to the championships. But for me now, I think he is, I wouldn't say 100%, but he is definitely on a level that he can just do the other races, and when there is some pain, he needs to check it and see what's going on. But it's very difficult at the moment, and I think he should just be very happy with his result.
Then on to the guy right behind him, his teammate, Michael van Toerenhout. This guy had everything thrown at him, not by the spectators, who were throwing middle fingers at Van der Poel and some beer again, but that's it for that. Van Toerenhout got some other things thrown at him. In the first lap, the bike of Zweek. Zweek missed the second barrier, hit it, jumped off his bike super late, and his bike went into Van Toerenhout, who crashed. Stayed on the ground for a bit, but strong recovery ride, despite a crash and another slip. Definitely not a flawless race, but good effort by him to come back, and eventually he takes the upper hand of Van der Haar. Both riders do a good job in terms of the Superprestige classification, because Zweek had an absolute nightmare. After that issue in the first lap, he absolutely fell down the field. He was in 8th in the final lap. He again lost a couple of places, ended 11th. He was leading the Superprestige going into yesterday's race. Now he's 10 points behind Van der Haar. His Superprestige classification is basically over. Van Toerenhout is in 2nd, 7 points down. Van der Haar is in a very good position for the Superprestige now. For Zweek, it was probably a matter of his back playing up again, which is very unfortunate for him. Then 2 more names that we need to discuss, or basically 1. Thibaut Nys, we've discussed him in Gavere already. He again put in a good effort today, but what a ride by his teammate Issam. David Haverdings, first year on a 23. We know that he's been, in terms of form, improving quite a bit post-training camp, but whoa, what a race by him. A top 10 here, impressive.
As if there was not enough curveballs thrown at me this race when the riders were finishing, and then you see Haverdings within the top 10. For me, was, to be honest, quite a shock, because it's his first year on the 23. He is trying to fit in with during the elites races, because you have to do quite some elite races while you are an under 23 guy. But you have to that is an experience you have to get through, and it's very difficult, but you have to adapt on that. And today, he had probably the best race of the season, I would say. It was definitely a very good race from his side, and a top 10, not so far off from Nys, by the way, which I think is that tells you enough that it is definitely a very, very good result. He's getting the hang of it, of racing with the elites and trying to get going. I think his position at the start is also a little bit better, so that helps. So yeah, I think that from him it's a very good result, and interesting to see if he can have some more of this during the Christmas period, because these are the moments that you have a lot of attention, so you can then show yourself. And it's also a very important period, because after this you have the nationals coming, and then obviously the World. So you want to be in a very good shape now and have some confidence, so you can go into the nationals and the Worlds with the confidence that you gained during this period.
Then let's go and talk about the women's race. Pieterse had the best start of the race, and in the first lap, up the first long climb, she put her teammate Seinda Carmen Alvarado under pressure. Alvarado couldn't follow the wheel, and the same went for the rest of the pack, and Pieterse opened a gap. Already in the first lap it looked to be game over, but that was not to the liking of Shirin van Anrooij, who had a pretty bad start. Van Anrooij came up to speed in the second lap and started gaining time on Puck Pieterse. She at some point very briefly even caught up to Puck Pieterse. However, Pieterse, who was bunny hopping the barriers, stretched out a gap there, and from there on Van Anrooij was never able to close the gap anymore. Puck Pieterse took the win in Diegem ahead of Van Anrooij. There was an interesting battle for the third place going on. Inge van der Heijden was able to follow Van Anrooij for a while when Van Anrooij was chasing Pieterse. She took a healthy lead of this over Alvarado. However, Alvarado found some good legs again in the second part of the race and managed to catch Inge van der Heijden. She managed to distance van der Heijden in the penultimate lap and take the lead in the Superprestige in doing so, as Betsema didn't have the best race. Puck Pieterse with the win here in Diegem. I don't really think it's a surprise seeing the course that had quite some technical features. Despite it being a tougher course than it might appear on TV, the technical sections really gave her the upper hand over Van Anrooij today.
Yeah, I mean that definitely helped her in this race. I mean, Pieterse was from the start determined to be at the front and open that gap on both power and technique. And when the gap was established, it was for her just a point of utilize your better places, the places where you actually can gain something technically, and you have a lot in Diegem, and then try to not lose as much in the sections where Van Anrooij was a little bit better, where you can utilize a little bit more power with the running a little. The sand section was also for Van Anrooij, in my opinion. She actually came closer, and I think that if Van Anrooij was actually able to bridge that gap in that one effort, it would have been a different race. Still would have given Pieterse the advantage, but it wasn't meant to be for Van Anrooij to close that gap. And when you are, that's probably the most killing feeling that you can have as an athlete, when you're trying to close a gap and you're just not succeeding in it. Just you're so close, but just that far, and then in the end it's going to be very difficult to mentally get over it. And Van Anrooij, at that moment knew that she didn't have anything to bridge that gap, and the race was ridden for Pieterse, and it was a victory for her.
Yeah, that bad start really cost Van Anrooij. I think it's a further confirmation that we know that Van Anrooij made a step in terms of form and now is able to match Pieterse, because I think they were pretty evenly matched. However, I do think that the difference in the race looked a bit more leaning towards Van Anrooij than it actually was. You can roughly divide the course in Diegem into two parts. You have the technical part, which basically starts around the sand pit, and then you have it ending with the first pit zone, and then you have the second part, which involves more climbing. Van Anrooij was definitely stronger on the climbing parts, especially this long paved climb. She really was able to take time out of Pieterse there, but Pieterse, minus the sand section, was better on the technical parts. She was bunny hopping in the barriers, gaining 3 seconds there every lap, sliding through the corners, very good on this muddy passage before you came to the finish. That really gave her the upper hand today. I would have wanted to see like a real battle here if Van Anrooij had a good start, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. But she can still be satisfied about the form level that she is reaching now, because I do think that she's been making serious progression throughout the season. And if things do go her way, I'm interested to see. I think that she should be the favorite for the cross in Koksijde, because we could see again today that she was very good in the sand. We know that she's very good in the sand, and this was again a confirmation. So I'm looking forward to her. She can take positives from it, but in the end, another win for Pieterse, I guess, can also be satisfied with this, because it didn't look to cost all too much effort in the end, did it?
No, and you could hear it in her race interview that she didn't really want to make the race from lap 1 and lead the race from lap 1 and actually have that solo that she had. Was even happy to let Van Anrooij back at a certain point, but then when she saw that there was an opportunity for her to keep that gap, she kept it. And at such a point you can say that Van Pieterse was definitely in control the majority of the race, and it was for her and I wouldn't say an easy race, because that's never an easy race, but it was from her side. It was a race where she some sort of control in the race and was able to maintain the gap that she had with Van Anrooij, at least make sure that the gap was always there, and both can be satisfied with, because Van Anrooij definitely made a step after that training camp, and that is going to be an interesting factor in the next coming races and leading up to the championships as well for Van Anrooij. What the decision will be. Elites are under 23 and go on, but that is for later. I think for now it's we can conclude that both were happy with the results, and probably for both the maximum achievable.
Yeah, I think both riders benefited of their freshness as well over the other riders. Alvarado today looked good, but in the first part of the race definitely seemed a bit tired. Looked to come through that tiredness in the second part of the race. It was a good race by her, and she stayed relatively calm, closed that gap on Van der Heijden, but I think there's not really all too much to say about Alvarado and Van der Heijden. Both riders end where you would expect them to end. They're still relatively close in the Superprestige standings. There's more to say about Betsema, because Betsema, she looked pretty good yesterday, despite some weird tactics of wasting energy. Well, in hindsight, wasting too much energy on a course like Zolder, which cost her a good result there. Today, I would have expected more from her, but 8th, it's disappointing, and it looks to be game over in the Superprestige with just 2 races left, and that's unfortunate, because she was off to such a good start in this classification, and after Boom really was in a promising position.
Yeah, it is it's a bit of a shame, but it's like I said, when the race of Zolder wasn't a very important race, and there it was already kind of lost, and then you are, I think probably if she looked back at Zolder, it's definitely not a great feeling, because you had a gap and that gap is kind of gone. She probably felt that she had the legs to do better than what she did, and then it's definitely not nice, and you don't have a day or a week to think about it, because guess what, next day you have to do it all over again for the same classification. So there was not a lot of time to rethink, or to at least have some some game plan for today, and today it was not a good day from her side. It was, I would say, semi-disappointing in a way. So I think that from her, the Superprestige is almost over, especially in the classification where you can gain only 1 point per place. It's very difficult to then gain 4 points. So I think for her, it's, she needs kind of a miracle to win it now in the Superprestige, and she has to benefit from mistakes and mishaps and problems from Alvarado and Van der Heijden.
I will say that this is not a good course for Betsema. It's it has some technical sections, but not the type of things that Betsema excels on. It's not a chaining of corners like we see in Rudderford. It doesn't have the elevation. It's a race with a lot of tarmac, a lot of high-risk corners, slipping and sliding, trying to get as close to the barriers as possible. It's not a Betsema course, and it's unfortunate, and it is in a way not necessarily a surprise that in what is probably the race with the most tarmac sections on the calendar, that riders like Vash, Persico and Backstedt, who all have road experience, end in front of her. But it's still a shame, and I think that on her cross quality I would have expected a bit more, but it clearly wasn't a good day for her, and there's nothing you can do about it anymore. Luckily she's still in a very good position in the X2O trophy. I don't think that she should worry there about her lead. That should definitely be a race where she can, or the next race there, Baal, should be a race that suits her. And from there on, she should focus on that classification and try and win her first ever classification. And I already said it earlier, if she somehow loses the X2O trophy, things will have gone seriously wrong, and that would be super disappointing. Today, it's obviously a disappointment for her, but we also need to put it in perspective. Like, it's not a good course for her. She raced yesterday, unlike Backstedt, unlike Vash. She has a bit of issues on courses like this, so it's still below expectation and disappointing in terms of the classification, but in terms of courses, let's be honest, it's no real surprise that a rider like Vash does well here, or was it?
Definitely surprising the way she went through the descent, because I think that was definitely good, and overall I think she rode quite a good race. Was around there with Backstedt and Persico a little, but then at the end, was able to be ahead of both. I think technically she's a little bit better than Persico and Backstedt, so I think that helped on the bike. So yeah, I think that in the end from her, definitely a good result. We don't have to forget Diegem also has some road sections, and you can have some sections where you can use some power. So I think that in the end, this was definitely within her abilities. The scent was definitely something that was a big improvement, and that was great to see, to be honest.
Yeah, that was surprisingly good. I think it played a factor that it was more of a power sandpit in the women's race than one that was decided on the technique. But it was still surprising to see her go through that so well. I think it was a good race by her. And I do think that we can, in all fairness, conclude that the riders who skipped yesterday's race after Gavre were a bit fresher than the riders who went back-to-back, which just makes a lot of sense when you say it, since they had an extra day of recovery whilst the others went back-to-back. Zolder, definitely not an easy race yesterday. So, yeah, Vash, 5th place, good result. Persico, 6th. Would have maybe hoped for a little bit more on a course like this, but on the other hand, after racing yesterday, also not terrible. So it is basically a mini Tour de France that they are riding here. De Klerk famously said this a couple of years, well, more than a couple of years ago, that the Christmas period is basically a mini Tour de France, and it is here also a mini Tour de France, but you choose the stages you do, and I think there's not all too much to say about Persico and Backstedt. I mean, both put in solid rides, and if we look at the top 10, let me give the full top 10 just for perspective. Pieterse with the win ahead of Van Anrooij and Alvarado. Van der Heijden in 4th ahead of Vash in 5th. Persico 6th, Backstedt 7th, Betsema 8th, Vorst in 9th and Van Alphen in 10th. I don't think there's all too much to say about that. Outside of the top 10, good race by Casasola, who barely missed out on that top 10, was in the top 10 for quite a while. Burquier also a good race on a course that doesn't really suit her, and I think that is basically it, unless you had anything that really stood out to you in the women's race.
No, not really. I think you mentioned it quite well. This for both Persico and Bakstad. They came onto their positions and they were both solid races. And it's just in the Christmas period you're going to have more of this, where you see that riders that maybe skipped one or two races and are a little bit fresher going into some of the races that we going to have later on this season, that they're going to be just that little bit better, and you can see that in the way they are riding and the result in the end. So no, but overall I think everybody came a bit more in his place. It was not as crazy as the men's race, which is a bit of a shame, but I think the women's race was definitely good. But after both races it's very difficult to then have the same, I would say, the hype, or at least the feeling in that sense, in both the men and the women's race. The women's race was compared to the men's race, was quite different. But how many times did we have the women's races more exciting than the men's races? So it's always you cannot always have both races be as exciting. And I think that we still had two very, very good races. The men's race, which was very exciting and something that we probably will not see again this season, and the women's race was a very solid race where we saw a very strong Pieterse.
Yeah, the women's race was a bit overshadowed by the men's race, but it was still a good one. The long break in between definitely didn't help. Now I think about it, I do have two more things to mention. Provaux once again having chain issues. Seems to be a bit of an issue with that Pinarello or with Provaux herself. And then for the rest, Letizia Borghesi, I hope I pronounced that correctly, the Italian from EF Education. She's doing some cross races again this period. She raced in Gavre. She's trained by Dieter van Toerenhout. She was known for doing some races in the past, but she's making some progression. She was 21st today, also not too bad in Gavre, 35th. It's progression, and she won't be a rider that's going to win races or end in the top 10, but it's still fun to see a road rider that comes race here do relatively well, because on the men's side we had other road riders that raced today. We saw that Gianni Vermeers raced, or Clément Venturini 22nd. I don't know where Vermeers ended. I saw him way in the pile-up. I think he ended somewhere around place 40. It wasn't a huge pack in lap 1. So, yeah, good to see one of these road riders come through with a decent result. Now on to one of the final episodes where I embarrass myself by trying to pronounce some foreign names, because there was a race in Turin today, the Turin International Cyclocross race. The men's race was won by Davide Toneatti, and they definitely don't make it easy for me, because Filippo Agustinaccio ended second. That is probably a mispronunciation, but we move. Marco Pavan completed the podium there. The women's race was won by Rebecca Gariboldi ahead of Federica Venturelli and Carlotta Borello. Issam, thank you for being here late at night to discuss the racing in Diegem.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a great pleasure, and on to the next one again.
Yeah, we will be back after Loenhout, which marks the halfway point of the Christmas period. 5 out of 10 crosses done after Loenhout. Also marks the end of the 2022 calendar year, going into 2023 with more cyclocross action. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks for your support on the podcast. Feel free to write to us either on Instagram message, through the website, or write to us directly, noah@cyclocross with 3 S's at the end.com. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.